Here to discuss this is Socialist author Grace Blakeley and former Conservative MP Louise Mensch. Well, Grace, I read the report. It's here. 40-odd pages of, frankly, awful stuff about a group of people, arrogant, entitled, brazenly ignoring their own rules, vomiting, fighting, boozing, even on the night before Prince Philip's funeral. And at the end of it, you just feel sickened. And yet no one seems to be taking any accountability whatsoever, least of all the person at the top.
Yeah, I mean, even what this report is, which is just, it's written in kind of bureaucratese, it's fairly kind of, it's, you know, just explaining what was going on. Even through all of that, you can still see this is pretty damning stuff. This would be a clear resignation issue for any other Prime Minister. The issue is, of course, is that it just seems as though Boris Johnson has no shame.
Right.
He's seen over and over again these allegations that have been made against him, these proven allegations that have been made against him, and he just thinks that he can continuously kick the can down the road and hope that he can distract the media, distract the rest of the Conservative Party.
I agree, but mainly because he does always get away with it. Louise Mensch, are you going to continue to defend the indefensible? You think that's it? Move on now?
Defend the indefensible, Piers. Your problem is that you've got a smoking gun right now, but what you don't have is Boris Johnson being the one that pulled the trigger. I have to wonder if we read the same report, because I went through those 40 pages, and it certainly did sound a bit like Animal House in Number 10, or some kind of frat party that we all had when we were 20 years old and at college. The problem that you've got, and that Boris Johnson's enemies have got, is that Sue Gray's report makes it clear that for almost all of these dues, he was in the room for a few minutes, then went on to another meeting.
What it makes clear, what it makes crystal clear is that he's the boss. It was all happening in his house and workplace. He was living there throughout all this. And he surely should have accountability as the person presiding over this mayhem. The idea that there were literally scores of illegal parties breaking the very rules that he was setting with his team and doing it in such a brazen manner, shameless manner. At what point in the old days, people would fall on their sword for far less than this? Well, why hasn't Boris Johnson just said, you know what, actually, this is just beyond the pale. I know what people were sacrificing in the country, and I'm gonna resign. Isn't that the decent thing to do?
He's got no reason to resign, far from being scores of parties. Let's just get this straight. There was 8 parties, in fact, for which fixed penalty notices were issued. 8, well, whatever, it's not scores, it's 8. And it's 8 very bad parties.
What are you talking about?
Piers, you say that he lives and works there. He lives in the private residence of other flat. He didn't hear this stuff going on.
Oh, nonsense.
He didn't come down and say, turn down the music.
Nonsense.
Oh, no, of course he didn't hear about it.
I've been in Downing Street many times. You can hear, of course he knew what was going on. And by the way, apparently he knew about the Friday night party every Friday.
Everyone looking at this knows exactly what's going on. You don't have to read the long and boring report that Boris Johnson deliberately kicked down the road, as long as he did, to hope that by this point there'll be something else for us to talk about. You don't have to go through all of those very, very clear allegations. You don't have to count the number of parties. Everyone knows that this is beyond the pale.
Don't talk over each other, please.
Abhorrent behaviour from a Prime Minister who thinks that he is above the law, who has no shame in making these laws and then breaking them himself. But the real issue here, and the issue that this is exposed, the issue that this government has repeatedly exposed by miring itself in scandal after scandal after scandal, is that there are no mechanisms in this country for holding our elite to account.
I agree.
We have parliamentary sovereignty. Fine, that's the way that this Westminster system works. We're supposed to also have checks and balances. There are supposed to be mechanisms that you can use to force people who have done something wrong to step down and not just rely on the rest of their party to take them out.
I agree. My point would be you shouldn't have to force Boris Johnson to step down. That actually, in the old days, a Prime Minister who was convicted of breaking a law he'd set and had all these members of staff doing this kind of thing, they would just resign.
But you can only rely on that, Piers, when you're talking about someone who actually has shame and thinks that he's,
nonsense.
All right, Louise, you made your point. You think it's all nonsense, overblown. He doesn't resign for. I get it. I just think you're completely wrong. Got to leave it there. Sorry, Louise,
Grace. There's an ethics committee.
Thank you both.
Referred to it.
Yeah, I know. I've read it. If you can't resign over this, I don't know what you resign over. I dread to think, frankly. Thank you both very much for your time.